The coming pension crisis, demographics versus promises. Right now, there are 2.8 workers paying into the system for every retiree taking benefits out. In 1960, that ratio was 5.1 to 1. By 2035, it will be 2.3 to 1. By 2050, some projections put it at 2 to 1. And the promises made to those retirees? Locked in by law, cost of living adjustments, guaranteed benefits, decades of payouts. Meanwhile, birth rates are at record lows, immigration is slowing, the population is aging faster than anyone predicted. This isn't a political problem, it's a math problem, and the math doesn't work. For decades, governments across the developed world have promised retirement benefits based on one assumption: there will always be more young workers than old retirees. That assumption is collapsing. The conventional wisdom says we just need economic growth, or higher taxes, or slight adjustments to retirement age. But none of those solutions address the core issue. We built a system that requires an ever-growing population, and we no longer have one. The pyramid is inverting. The broad base of young workers that was supposed to support the narrow peak of retirees is disappearing, and when it flips completely, the structure fails. The modern pension system was born in 1889 when Otto von Bismarck introduced the first state-funded old age insurance in Germany. The retirement age was 70. Life expectancy at the time was around 45 for men. The system was designed for a world where most people never lived long enough to collect. When the United States launched Social Security in 1935, the same logic applied. Retirement age was set at 65. Average life expectancy for men was 60. The system was a safety net for the few who outlived their working years, not a guaranteed two-decade vacation funded by the next generation. Fast forward to today. In the U.S., life expectancy is nearly 79. Retirement age? Still 65, or even earlier. People are collecting benefits for 15, 20, sometimes 30 years, and the workforce supporting them is shrinking. Japan offers the clearest warning. In 1990, Japan had 5.8 workers per retiree. Today, it's 2.1. By 2050, projections put it at 1.3. The government has tried everything: raising taxes, cutting benefits, subsidizing births. None of it has reversed the trend. The architects of these systems weren't fools. They were operating on the best data they had. Birth rates were high, averaging 3.5 children per woman in the U.S. during the 1950s. Life expectancy was rising slowly. Post-war growth made it seem like the pie would keep expanding indefinitely. But they made one critical mistake. They locked in promises that assumed those conditions would last forever. They didn't. By the 1970s, birth rates in most developed countries were already falling. The pill, cultural shifts, women entering the workforce, urbanization, all contributed to smaller families, and life expectancy kept climbing faster than actuaries predicted. Medical advances meant people weren't just living to 70, they were living to 80, 85, 90. Decades of benefit payouts the system wasn't designed to handle. Pension systems work on a simple premise. Current workers pay for current retirees, and when those workers retire, the next generation pays for them. It's a chain. And it only works if each link is stronger than the last. Here's what happens when the chain weakens. Contributions have to increase. If there are fewer workers per retiree, each worker must pay more to cover the same benefit. In France, pension contributions now consume nearly 28% of wages. Benefits have to decrease. Governments start means testing, reducing cost of living adjustments, raising the retirement age. In the UK, the state pension age is set to rise to 68 by 2046. And the deficit grows. When contributions don't cover benefits, governments borrow to fill the gap. That debt compounds. Greece's pension crisis in 2010 was a preview. Benefits were slashed by up to 40% and riots erupted. The math is unforgiving. Birth rates across the developed world are below the replacement threshold of 2.1 children per woman. South Korea is at 0.72, less than half what's needed to maintain the population. Spain, 1.19. Italy, 1.24. Japan 1.26, Germany 1.53, the US 1.64, the lowest on record. And the trend is accelerating. Younger generations are having fewer children than their parents, starting families later, or choosing not to have children at all. Governments have tried to fight it. Japan has offered cash payments for newborns, subsidized childcare, extended parental leave. Nothing has moved the needle. South Korea has spent over $200 billion on pro-natalist policies over 2 decades. The birth rate kept falling. France, with the most aggressive family policies in Europe, is still at 1.83, below replacement. There is no evidence that any government has successfully reversed a structural decline in fertility once it takes hold. Immigration has historically been the other lever, and it can help, but only at scales that are politically unsustainable in most countries. Even if you doubled immigration into the U.S. tomorrow, the ratio of workers to retirees would still deteriorate over the coming decades. It buys time. It doesn't solve the problem. And here's the issue you can't solve your way around. You can't save your way out of a pay-as-you-go system. Unlike a funded pension, where your contributions are invested in assets that grow over time, pay-as-you-go depends entirely on the next generation. There's no investment account, just a promise that future workers will pay future retirees. If that generation is smaller, there's no reserve to draw from. Some countries are experimenting with alternatives. Sweden shifted to a notional defined contribution system in the 1990s, where benefits are tied to what you pay in and automatically adjusted for life expectancy and economic growth. It's more sustainable, but it also means retirees bear the risk. If the economy stalls, if you live longer than projected, your benefit shrinks. The certainty that defined benefit pensions promised is gone. Others are simply defaulting quietly. Puerto Rico declared bankruptcy in 2017, and pension obligations were a central part of the restructuring. Detroit did the same in 2013. Retirees who were promised full benefits saw them cut. These aren't hypothetical failures. They're demonstrations of what happens when the math stops working, and there's no political will to address it before the crisis arrives. If you're under 40, you should assume the pension system as it exists today will not be there in its current form when you retire. That's not pessimism, it's arithmetic. The ratio of workers to retirees will not improve. The promises already made cannot all be kept. And when push comes to shove, the system protects those already receiving benefits, not those still paying in. The practical response is straightforward. Don't count on government pensions as your primary retirement plan. Assume they'll be means-tested, delayed, or reduced. Build your own funded retirement. A 401k, IRA, or private pension puts you in control. The money is yours, invested in assets that grow over time. You're not dependent on the next generation to fund you. You've already funded yourself. Max out your contributions. Start early. A 25-year-old contributing $500 a month with a 7% annual return will have over $1.1 million by age 65. That's the fundamental difference between a pay-as-you-go system and a funded system. One relies on demographics. The other relies on compound interest. And compound interest doesn't care how many babies are born. Beyond your own finances, pay attention to the politics. Every budget fight, every tax increase, every pension reform proposal over the next 3 decades traces back to this same underlying problem. We promised more than we can deliver, and someone has to absorb the loss. It will be retirees through benefit cuts, workers through higher taxes, or future generations through debt, most likely all 3. Watching how governments navigate this will tell you more about economic direction than almost any other single issue, because it will shape tax policy, immigration policy, and healthcare simultaneously. It is the defining fiscal challenge of the coming generation. The deeper lesson is this: don't rely on systems built on assumptions that no longer hold. Bismarck set the retirement age at 70 in a country where most men died at 45. He wasn't being generous, He was being actuarially precise. The promise cost almost nothing because almost no one collected. We've inherited the promise without updating it for a world where people live 40 years past retirement. That gap between what was designed and what reality requires is where the crisis lives. The pension crisis is not an abstract policy debate. It's a ticking clock. The first defaults are already happening at the municipal level. The first benefit cuts are already being disguised as formula adjustments. The first retirement ages are already being quietly raised. These are not warnings. They are the beginning. Your financial security is your responsibility. Not because the system is broken, but because it was always only as strong as the assumptions underneath it. Those assumptions changed. Plan accordingly. Save aggressively. And understand that the most important financial decision of the next decade isn't which stock to buy. It's whether you're building a retirement that doesn't depend on the next generation to fund it. Because that next generation, there are fewer of them every year.